I like pranks, and I mean good pranks. I often said that, calling me 300 times while I'm trying to get my work done is not necessarily a prank. In fact, I asked Howard at the time, I said, okay, this is really funny. Give me your phone number, Howard, and I'll call you 300 times over the next couple of weeks, and we'll have a great laugh about it. And Howard was like, how dare you? And I was like, well, first of all, Howard, I'm not sure you should be getting my children involved on the Stern Show, because obviously it was our policy and practice never to talk about his children. So that was the single reason why I left. I'm not sure they were pleased when they knew I was leaving, but it was time for me to go.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Here's the Pitch, sponsored by Masters Restaurants in St. Louis. Today, it's Steve Langford. You remember him from Howard 100 News. Tell us a little bit about your days, just as you think back to your days at Howard 100. Tell me a little bit about what you think of when you think of those days.
Well, it was a great opportunity. It was a great match. We got there. We were mostly hired around the same time, a bunch of us. And my attitude was, I don't go into every job like this, but in that job, I knew exactly what to do. Just tell stories with a lot of color. And so I didn't ask anybody what to do. I just did it. And it was great because it was a blank slate. And by and large, nobody ever said anything about, how you're supposed to do it. I knew how to do it, and I did it. Obviously, we weren't as stupid as we looked. We didn't investigate Howard. Though there were stories we reported on him, and I don't think he was always pleased with what we did. But we basically had free reign to report on everybody, perhaps other than Howard. It's not like Howard said you can't report on. It's just we didn't investigate the hell out of the guy, but we did go after and reported a lot on all the other people on the show, and they were not always happy with me. But you may remember the Robin Quivers, Jim Florentine romance, and we actually put a promo on the news because we wanted to report on this developing story. What was going on with these two. It was a great story. Florentine is an amazing comedian. Robin Quivers is an extraordinary individual who's not always easy to get along with, but really an amazing human being. Anyway, they were dating. And so we put a promo on Howard 100 News. We're covering the romance, budding romance of Jim Florentine and Robin Quivers. If you see anything happening anywhere, call us on the Howard 100 News tip line, 877, whatever it was. And we got calls from everyone. Everything they did, we got a call on. And Robin was not too happy with that.
I was a huge fan of this era when Artie came in 01, and then you guys go to Satellite, and it was just hilarious. But everyone has to obviously understand that Artie, there's something going on with Artie, but Howard doesn't want to talk about it. Tell me how hard it was to sort of not be able, I know even Lisa G was saying, I have a file, and I'd be interested to hear about that file, I guess. But tell me what you thought about those days where, Artie's falling asleep, he's not showing up, and everybody's asking these questions. Can the news team find out? How is it to deal with all that?
Well, up until the end, Artie, even in good days, really liked to control. He didn't like being covered by somebody like me because I would report what happened. I reported what I saw, and he didn't care for that. And it was not always flattering, obviously. I remember one time toward the end there where he was doing an appearance in Philadelphia, a book signing, I think. And I went over to Hoboken, I think, and there was a party bus. So we were supposed to leave, and the book signing in Philadelphia was, say, 7:00 or something like that. And 6 or 6:30 or something. And Artie's clowning around, and we're not actually going to the book signing. We got hundreds of people waiting for him at a bookstore in Philadelphia. And I'm just like, what is this? Is this the way you treat your fans? And I reported that.
everybody now is wondering, where is he? I'm sure you probably don't have a chance to talk to him or have his number, but you are a hard scrabble journalist. You got to find out where he is, Steve. What do you know about him? Do you know anything about him? What was the last contact you had with him? And where is he? What can we do? He showed up doing a podcast, nose all messed up, and now we don't know where he is.
I have no idea. I mean, I covered the Stern Show when I was there, and now I don't cover that beat anymore. So I don't know. And Artie and I were obviously not friends.
Yeah, I mean, that's really enterprising journalism, as they say. So what is a day, a week like there, where you guys come in on a Monday, or maybe you have a meeting on a Thursday? Here's what we're going to cover. How does the news team decide? I mean, you got to come in every day and have a news update. You and Lisa G were basically the two guys, or two news people coming in and doing that. What is that like? I mean, you're just sitting on the phone all day, and are you listening to the show, and is someone pitching you? Jason, I'm sure Jason Kaplan probably just threw you stuff to because he was one of those gossip guys. But
You're listening to the show a lot. Because Gary, reminds me of a story like one afternoon, as we're churning out material all day long, and one day Gary calls me and says, "I don't know whether you'd be interested in this story, but I'm going to run for a position on the town council in Greenwich, Connecticut, where I live." And I just, in my gut, I knew immediately. I think I knew more than Gary knew that this was going to be a great story. And so sure enough, Gary says a couple of weeks later, he says, "Listen, we're having this meeting where I'm going to introduce myself to the people on the town council in Greenwich as I run for this position on the Parks and Recreation Commission. So would you like to come and cover it?" And there'll be a reporter there from the Greenwich paper and, whoever else wants to cover it. I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And I have my microphone. Everybody knows I'm a reporter. And Gary gets a question from one of the council members, a woman, who says, "Mr. dell'abate, I've been reading up on your background. And I understand you're with the Howard Stern show. Now, it seems I've learned that included in your duties, at one point you were throwing lunch meat at a woman's rear end." Well, I'm holding the microphone, trying not to cry, because it was so surreal and funny. And Gary is like, I'm going to try to explain this. And I knew right away that this was absolute gold. So sure enough, the next day on the Stern Show, it was. And I covered the story from there on. It was just extraordinary.
That is hilarious. But on the converse side, you've got Richard and Sal, and I'm sorry, you do have this call from Sour Shoes that comes in that's not actually Sour Shoes. Can you laugh about that now looking back? Because this thing was played over and over.
Yeah, I know. I often tell Gary that I did 6 years of a lot of really great reporting, and the only damn thing they play is that alleged prank phone call.
What was that like? To know that they got you, and not only did they get you, it's some people do a practical joke and then it's over, but this thing is going to be played now you just hear Sour Shoes.
Well, listen, worse things have happened on that show, but I got to tell you, I like pranks, and I mean good pranks. I often said that calling me 300 times while I'm trying to get my work done is not necessarily a prank. In fact, I asked Howard at the time. I said, "Okay, this is really funny. Give me your phone number, Howard, and I'll call you 300 times over the next couple of weeks, and we'll have a great laugh about it."
How was your relationship with Lisa G when you worked there, and now it's like the two of you are really the two that kind of got big because you came in every day.
Listen, we sat beside each other. We got along just fine. But we were very different. Her reporting, my reporting was they were very different, those styles.
So tell me, we talked about George Takei, but I think that was part of the reason what happened for you not to stay there longer, right? So I think there was a moment where maybe your daughter wanted to do. Tell me a little bit. Okay, yeah, let's clear that up then. So what brought this period in your life to an end?
No, in fact, no. That had absolutely nothing. No, I'll explain that, but no, that had absolutely nothing to do with me leaving. The reason I left is that my sense was that Howard was losing interest in the news team. And that is his right. It is his show. It is the most successful show in the history of radio. So I had 5 or 6 really good years there. But wherever I work, if I get a sense that there's so much interest in what we do anymore, I want to move on. So that was the single reason why I left. I'm not sure they were pleased when they knew I was leaving, but it was time for me to go. But in terms of the George Takei thing, I mean, listen, part of it's shtick. Who the hell knows? But, Howard said something about, I asked George if my young daughter could interview him briefly on the phone about the internment camps. And Howard was like, how dare you? And I was like, well, first of all, Howard, I'm not sure you should be getting my children involved on the Stern show, because obviously it was our policy and practice never to talk about his children.
So what was that? What was those early days like? Because from what I remember, the news team kind of came on the air before Howard even could go on the air. He started at 1906. Everybody remembers that. But Sirius, his channels kind of went live, I believe, September, October. And the first thing I think people heard was like Ralph Howard and this news team, and you guys start reporting. So give me just that background of just that starting. It's basically a startup news company with a startup Howard Stern channel that most startups don't get this sort of backing, but that people are going to be listening.
Yeah, it was extraordinary how people listened. We got there. We were mostly hired around the same time, a bunch of us. And my attitude was, I don't go into every job like this, but in that job, I knew exactly what to do. Just tell stories with a lot of color. And so I didn't ask anybody what to do. I just did it. And it was great because it was a blank slate. And by and large, nobody ever said anything about, how you're supposed to do it. I knew how to do it, and I did it. Not everybody liked it, but that's the way I do news. So one of the first memories of being there at the beginning, it was only a few days in. We were jammed in this tiny little newsroom on the 36th floor at Sirius, and we had not met Howard Stern yet. None of that I know of. I certainly have. And Howard Stern and Ed Bradley march into this tiny room. And Ed Bradley says, well, Howard, what's going on here? And Howard says, well, this is actually our new news team. We just hired these people, and they're reporting on everything going on in the world of Howard Stern. And Ed Bradley says to Howard, as the cameras were rolling, well, what are they reporting on right now? And he said, well, actually, I think they're reporting on something called the Craptacular that we're doing live. There's a man in an apartment in Queens. And, to make a long story short, we're having this man fed live on the air, live on Howard 101, I guess, for 24 hours straight. We're feeding food as we can, and we have a portable toilet in the apartment, and we're going to see how much he can produce. And we're all betting on how much he will produce. And Ed Bradley looks at him as the cameras are rolling and goes, well, what exactly is so funny about that? At which point, even the camera guys couldn't hold it together. They were laughing so hard. It was great.
And George Takei was another one you got the chance to cover a lot. I know you really have a special place for him because of some of the stories you got to do with him. It became more of a thing. This would be one of those where you could say, listen, this is way out of the Howard Stern universe. I could do this at any time. Tell me a little bit about that relationship.
So one day, George would be there at the show, and he was funny as hell, and, he was a great, great man. Is a great, great man. But I read something about, we knew in the background that he'd been imprisoned in an internment camp in the West during World War II as a Japanese American. And then I read this line that he and his family, when he was 5 years old, before they were sent to the camps, they were forced to live in a horse stall at a racetrack in Los Angeles. And that just hit me. I went and saw George, and I said, what on earth would, and it occurred to me that we could do, because radio is easier than television in terms of production, we could do a documentary about his childhood. And he agreed. And so I went to Los Angeles. I spent an entire day with him and Brad, his spouse. And we drove around Los Angeles to all these locations. We went to George's home, where the Takei family had lived in April of 1942. Nice little home in East LA, I think it was. And George had not been back since that time. And just like U.S. soldiers banged on the door in April of 1942 and told the Takei family at gunpoint, "You're coming with us," because they were Japanese American. We banged on the door. There was a gentleman who opened the door, somewhat bewildered, like, what are these people doing? And why is George Takei at my door? But George explained very clearly that, I lived here in 1942. This is where U.S. soldiers took us. And could we come in? And the man said, of course. And so, it was extraordinary to see and to record and George reliving that. And then we went all around Los Angeles to the downtown, where they put them on buses. They took them to at a native racetrack where George and his family lived in a horse stall like animals for several months before being taken on trains with the blinds down so that nobody could see them and they couldn't see out. And they were taken to prison camps in Arkansas and Northern California, I think it was. So I did a documentary, a radio documentary about that, and I was very proud of it.
Yeah, no, I was just saying thank you because, I loved that show, and to me, it was a big part of it. Like when you'd come in and you had your own song, probably won't sing it here, but it makes you laugh. And that's a good song to have kind of be your song, right?
It was, when Howard first confronted me on the air with that, I immediately denied that it was true. Of course, only I would do that. But, Stal and Richard immediately made a jingle, and Howard played that jingle every single time I went in the studio.
Well, I would take that jingle, and if you haven't heard it, then you're not a Stern fan, but it's a wonderful jingle. I thank Steve Langford for joining me. This has really been an honor. I appreciate his time. And again, Masses Restaurant's my sponsor, stlmasses.com. You can go to that website, find their menus here in St. Louis. If you're watching around the world, dip in through St. Louis, and they'll get you set up. Tell them you saw Here's the Pitch with Steve or any of the guests you've seen here before. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.